The following program contains graphic material, including offensive language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Peterson case, it came back to life this year because his conviction and the sentence of death was changed to a life without the possibility of parole. And then they were hoping to get a whole new trial based on some juror misconduct. As you know, Scott Peterson, Saturday, 20 years to the day for when he killed his wife, Lacey Peterson, and 8-month-old Connor, yet unborn at that particular time. So that's where this thing is. Well, this week, he was denied a new trial by a California judge. Happened just yesterday. This was something they'd been banking on based on, really, like I said, juror misconduct. His attorney, Pat Harris, released a statement yesterday about the recent developments. He said, quote, "Obviously, we're disappointed in today's ruling, but this case is far from over. Just in the last few months, we've learned new information that will prove Scott Peterson did not murder his wife, Lacey. And we are going to continue to push forward until he is freed." So I would say that that's what attorneys do. That's what they say. I can't wait to see what the new evidence might be. Let's see what my panel has to think about this, because we thought this case was long gone. And I thought, Joe Richardson's here, Richard Schoenstein's here. Joe, I thought this case had really reached the punctuation when his sentence was effectively commuted to life without the possibility of parole from a death sentence. And yet, no. Did you think they had any chance with this juror misconduct argument?
Very little. And what the judge pointed out is the judge made a distinction between Scott Peterson's situation and the juror whose situation was questioned. Mark Garagos, these other folks, their thing was that, and Mark Garagos was the former attorney, their thing was that, she should have marked that, basically acknowledged that she was in a domestic violence situation that had the potential to make her biased, and therefore she could have been protested for cause and could have been dismissed from the jury. And so the judge said that this is really, her situation was more frankly like a love triangle, and she ended up filing a TRO or try to get a restraining order, not because she was scared of the lady or she considered herself a victim. It's just that she didn't want to get in a physical altercation while she was pregnant and with child. And even the things that she said, it's kind of weird that she writes him letters afterward, and some of that kind of stuff, this particular juror. But even then, the judge said that was evidence of just her emotional reaction to the evidence. It didn't make her biased. It didn't make her someone that had predetermined that he was going to be convicted. And it's not as if there wasn't plenty of evidence there to convict him. I thought that it would come out this way. I think that it's I wouldn't say it's a fool's errand because it's their right to do, but I think it's slim and none him actually getting off on this thing and getting a new trial. He's lucky he got life. He got life because as opposed to death because of a juror issue. So he's going to have to take that and call it a day.
Yep, slim and none, and Slim left town. Is that how that goes? I see that picture of Scott Peterson there with his hair dyed when he was in jail. I mean, is there a beauty shop in the prison there? What's the deal there? That's not my question, Rich. My question is, what new evidence could possibly be out there that is going to reopen this case?
I have no idea. But, we have seen convictions overturned years and years after somebody's been put in prison for murder or for other crimes. It does happen. And the system allows a lot of collateral attacks on a sentence, especially if you did come up. I mean, if you all of a sudden got evidence that somebody else did the murders and not the person in jail, we have a system that allows for that kind of evidence to be presented. Scott Peterson needs to have an advocate, somebody willing to take on his defense and to pursue those claims and to bring them to the attention of the court. It appears he has that. He had somebody for this juror misconduct issue, and now this lawyer says they have evidentiary issues as well. We will see. Do I think there's something there? Probably not.
But who knows? They need a Perry Mason moment, where somebody stands up and, admits to having done it. Mark Garagos, maybe he'll get involved again. I remember covering the Winona Ryder shoplifting trial. Here's what I learned from Mark Garagos. He used to keep his glasses in his pocket like that, with just the earpiece hanging out. I just thought that was, I'm easily impressed, obviously. I just thought that was just a very cool way to just be ready to go. Anyway, we'll see if that actually happens with some new evidence there. Joe, if you were a betting man, can you put odds on whether or not there's ever going to be anything to get this notorious killer out of prison?
0.00001. That's all I'll give them. That they won't find it. I mean, at the end of the day, I can't get away from, him with a bag full of money and a fake beard. You know what I mean? Not exactly the conduct that you're undertaking when you are innocent. Plus, this is the first time I really saw that somebody can have a whole lot of circumstantial evidence and still be guilty and no direct evidence. I am sure that he did it.
Yeah, and to your point, Rich, it's good that we have a system where you do have all these options. That's just the way it should be. So you got to shut those all down, and they've been doing that. We'll keep you posted, of course, if Scott Peterson actually does get another shot based on any new evidence.
Are you ready? Hey everybody, it's Jeff. I hope everybody's having a good day. I wanted to talk about a 20-year-old murder case that happened out in California. It's the Scott Peterson and Lacey Peterson murder case. And, I had watched in the last, couple of days, some video talking about the whole thing and the jury and all that shit that, just basically sort of, a documentary of what happened. And, at the time, I wasn't like really glued to the story because for one thing, the only person who seemed to actually be covering the thing on a day-to-day basis was Nancy Grace, and she irritates the shit out of me. I don't like listening to her, so it was because of her that I just kind of tuned out, and I just, did my own thing. So I just followed it in the newspapers and on the nightly news when they'd have anything about it, and that was basically it. But there was a whole lot more going on in that story than I was even aware of. Okay. Now, most people today will tell you that Scott Peterson committed the crime. He killed his wife, and she was pregnant, at the time. And I guess even 20 years later, the feelings are still very much high about that case, and people are firmly ensconced in where they believe then, they still believe today. And I was of the mindset that it was a pretty slam dunk case, okay, that occurred, and that it was, obvious that he did it. However, there's a lot of things that went on in that trial, and a lot of things that went on in the investigation that just was sloppy, needless to say, very sloppy, okay. And it's not to say that I believe that Scott Peterson didn't kill his wife. It's just that if I was a juror that day, I would have had a lot of reasonable doubt, okay, whether or not he actually physically did it, okay. Now it doesn't take away maybe that he hired somebody to do it, okay, but it does put a lot of doubt on the fact that he actually did it, okay. And some of the jurors to this day, one in particular that was questioned by Larry King way back, couldn't even answer the question about how the murder even happened. Okay, they couldn't spell out with any detail. Instead, what you got was, sort of an emotional firebranding of Scott, and the assured opinion that he did it. Okay, but he couldn't really lay out exactly what happened that day. I mean, how she ended up dead. What went on step by step by step. He couldn't do it, and that's the fault of the lawyers, because they couldn't show the jury how the crime was supposedly committed. And a lot of the things that they said that the defense argued for couldn't be proven. A lot of things that the prosecution said couldn't be proven. And the only thing that really got people's attention was the closing statements, which were very emotionally driven. Okay, and it just felt like people were not of the state of mind of being objective, and the jury, to be able to actually sit down and look at the facts in front of them and make an honest judgment, that fit the sloppiness of the investigation and the trial itself. Okay, so I'm a person that I'm not quick to rule on anyone's guilt or innocence if I have reasonable doubt. And I want to just point out a few things here that were oddities. But I think first what I ought to do is just kind of remind people about the case itself. So I put up a thing here for me to kind of read through. Okay, on December the 23rd, 2002. At 5:45 p.m., Peterson and Lacey went to Salon, the workplace of Lacey's sister, Amy Rocha, for a monthly scheduled haircut. As they spoke, Rocha said Peterson offered to pick up a fruit basket that she had ordered for her grandfather as a Christmas gift the next day, because he would be playing golf at a course nearby. Prosecutors say Peterson also told other people he would be playing golf on the day of Christmas Eve. Later that evening, Sharon Rocha, Lacey's mother, spoke with Lacey on the telephone around 8:30 p.m. Peterson later told police that he last saw his wife about 9:30 a.m. on December the 24th. When he left to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina, he said that she was mopping the floor and was planning to walk the dog, Mackenzie. The dog's name was Mackenzie, at a nearby park, and bake gingerbread cookies. Peterson had also said that she had been watching a Martha Stewart cooking show that morning. A waste of time that would have been. Later that morning, Karen Service, a neighbor of the Peterson, stated that around 10:30 a.m. she found the Peterson's dog, a golden retriever named Mackenzie, alone outside the home, and returned him to the Peterson's backyard. Another neighbor named Mike Chiavetta said he saw Mackenzie at about 10:45 in the morning as he played catch with his own dog. The Modesto Bee also reported an unnamed female neighbor who found the dog with a muddy leash wandering in the neighborhood, and who returned the dog to the Peterson's yard, not observing that anything was out of place. Peterson said he returned home that afternoon to find it empty. Peterson said Lacey's '96 Land Rover Discovery SE was in the driveway. Peterson also stated that he found Mackenzie in the backyard, and that he related this to Lacey's mother, Sharon, though she later denied this in her book. He showered and washed his clothes because he got wet during his fishing trip from the bay and being rained on. As police detective Alan Brochini later testified, he then ate some pizza with milk. Ugh. According to ABC News, Peterson called his mother-in-law, Sharon Rocha, to ask if Lacey was with her, which was the first time Sharon learned that Lacey was missing. Later that evening, Ron Gransky called the police to report Lacey missing. Lacey was 7.5 months pregnant, with a due date of February 10 of 2003. The couple had planned to name the baby boy Connor. Lacey was reported missing on Christmas Eve, and the story attracted nationwide media interest. Modesto police detectives Alan Broschini and John Bueller, the lead investigator on the case, responded to the call. When they arrived at the Peterson home, Lacey's keys, wallet, and sunglasses were found in her purse in a closet. When the detectives questioned Peterson that evening, Bueller told ABC News in 2017, quote, "I suspect Scott when I first met him. Didn't mean he did it, but I was a little bit thrown off by his calm, cool demeanor and his lack of questioning. He wasn't, 'Will you call me back? Can I have one of your cards? What are you guys doing now?' Quote." Bueller further described Scott's behavior as a strange combination of polite and arrogant, disaffectively distant, and impatiently irritable. He just didn't seem like a man who was crushed or even greatly disturbed by his wife's disappearance and possible death. Although Peterson initially said he had spent the day golfing, he later told the police that he had gone to fish for sturgeon at the Berkeley Marina at 2:15 p.m. He left a message for Lacey stating, quote, "Hey beautiful, it's 2:15, I'm leaving Berkeley," unquote. Peterson stated that he went fishing about 90 miles from the couple's Modesto home. Detectives immediately launched a search. Sharon Rocha immediately hurried to the park to search for her daughter. She stated that when she saw Scott about 20-30 feet away, she repeatedly called him by name, but he did not acknowledge her and was distant when she approached him back at his house, angling away from her when she attempted to hug him. Although inconsistencies in Peterson's statements led police to suspect foul play almost immediately, they did not treat the case as suspicious within the first few hours after the missing persons report was filed. During this initial period, Peterson's in-laws defended him and portrayed him and Lacey as the ideal couple, and public perception of Peterson reflected this. As police continued to investigate, they grew more suspicious of Peterson. On January the 17th, 2003, it became known that Peterson had engaged in 2 other affairs prior to an affair with a woman named Amber Frey. Frey informed police of their relationship on December the 30th, 2002, shortly after discovering he was a person of interest in Peterson's disappearance. She told detectives that she met Peterson on November the 20th and that he had initially told her he was single. She also informed police that Scott had told her on December 9th, 2 weeks before Peterson's disappearance, he was a widower and it would be the first Christmas without his wife. Police considered whether this was an indication that Peterson had already decided to kill Lacey, which Sharon Rocha agreed was a possibility. She agreed to phone him while police recorded her subsequent phone conversations with Peterson in the hopes of getting him to confess. During the trial, the audio recordings of the couple's telephone conversation were played and the transcripts were publicized. The recordings revealed that in the days after Lacey went missing, Peterson told Frey that he had traveled to Paris to celebrate the holidays, in part with his new companions Pasquale and Francois. In reality, he had made one of these phone calls minutes before attending the New Year's Eve candlelight vigil for Lacey in Modesto. At a January 24, 2003 press conference, the Rocha family publicly withdrew their support of Peterson, explaining that they did this upon learning of his affair with Frey, in particular upon seeing photos of Peterson and Frey together. A month after Lacey's disappearance, her brother, Brent Rocha, stated at a press conference that although Peterson had admitted to him during a January 16, 2003 phone conversation that he had been traveling an affair with a woman from Fresno at the time, Peterson was now no longer communicating with the family, the Rocha family. Okay, so, all of that led, finally to him being arrested as a suspect, involved with his wife's disappearance. Let me read here. Okay. Yeah, he'll read the rest of this. Is important too. On April 13th, 2003, a couple was walking their dog and found the decomposing body of a small baby in a marshy area of the San Francisco Bay Shore in Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park, north of Berkeley. Although a judge sealed autopsy results, an anonymous Associated Press source revealed that 1.5 loops of nylon tape were found around the fetus's neck, and a significant cut was on the fetus's body. 1 day later, a passerby found the torso of a recently pregnant woman wearing beige pants and a maternity bra on the eastern shore of the bay, along a rocky shoreline of the same park. 1 mile away from where the baby's body was found, the corpse was decomposed to the point of being almost unrecognizable as a human body, since the head, arms, most of the legs, and all the internal organs except for the uterus were missing. On April 18, 2003, the results of DNA tests verified that the bodies were Laci Peterson and her son, who was to be named Connor. The autopsy on both bodies was performed by forensic pathologist Dr. Brian Peterson, no relation. Connor's skin was not decomposed at all, though the right side of his body was mutilated. On April 24th, ABC News report stated his umbilical cord was still attached, and the San Francisco Chronicle reported that it appeared torn rather than cut or clamped, as is the normal practice following a birth. However, ABC News later reported on May 30 that according to the autopsy, the placenta and umbilical cord were not found with the body. The exact date and cause of Laci's death were never determined. Her cervix was intact. She had suffered 2 cracked ribs, but Dr. Peterson could not determine if this occurred before or after her death. Laci's upper torso had been emptied of all internal organs except for the uterus, which protected the fetus, explaining the lower level of decomposition experienced. Dr. Peterson concluded that the fetus had died in utero and determined he had been expelled from Laci's decaying body, though when cross-examined in court the following year, he conceded that he could not determine whether he had been born alive when this occurred. Dr. Peterson also found meconium in the fetus's bowels, which is the first stool passed after birth. The discovery of the bodies created a greater sense of urgency for Broschini and Bueller, who had put a tracker on Peterson's car. Knowing that he was in San Diego at the time, they feared he would escape across the border into Mexico. Broschini commented in 2017, quote, "I just thought, we've got to find Scott right now. He told me he was there, and that's where the bodies come up. I mean, I believe it was premeditated. He planned it. San Diego was pretty damn close to the Mexican border. Scott knew the area pretty well. That's where his parents lived. That's where he lived. So it wasn't like he was going to have to get on MapQuest to try and figure out a way to get to Tijuana," unquote. The FBI and Modesta Police Department performed forensic searches of Peterson's home. The FBI also conducted mitochondrial DNA testing on a hair from pliers found in Peterson's fishing boat that linked them with hairs recovered from Laci's hairbrush. The authorities also served Peterson's pickup truck, toolbox, warehouse, and boat. They found a homemade anchor in the boat Peterson purchased 2 weeks earlier. Peterson told a detective that he made the anchor in his boat using a 90-pound bag of concrete and used the rest to repair his driveway. However, petrographer Robert O'Neill said that microscopic analysis of solid fragments and powder found in Peterson's warehouse pickup bed, boat cover, and a plastic pitcher matched the material in the single anchor, as well as a pea-sized pebble police found in his living room, but none matched a sample from the driveway. Detective Harry Dodge Hendy testified that he found a cement-like substance on the wooden bed of a boat trailer when he searched Peterson's warehouse on December the 27th. Hendy pointed to what he said were 5 circular areas on the trailer that had less powder than other areas on the trailer. He also found a dustpan surrounded by the white powder and a sledgehammer. Prosecutors believe that Peterson made 5 anchors and used 4 of them to sink Laci's body in San Francisco Bay. After Peterson was arrested, police conducted further searches in the bay in an attempt to locate the anchors, but none was found. Okay, so yeah, that that shows, you know, what they were trying to do to prove that he did it, right? And so, you know, right off, even in this part that they talk about, there's still, you know, parts of this that they can't prove yet, although that's what people suspect happened, okay? And, you know, it may be true. It may be that's how it happened, but when you're talking about sinking bodies with cement, okay, and you can't really, and you can't find just one block of it, you know, because they obviously, he said they tied up, you know, 4 of those things on her in order to get her to sink, because, you know, she's a 150-pound plus woman because she's pregnant, and, you know, that wasn't enough to guarantee she was going to sink. So they had, you know, he had to, you know, or supposedly had to put weights on her to keep her down in the water. Okay, so that's a lot of weight to haul onto a small boat that he had bought, a 14-foot boat. Now, let me tell you something. I had a canoe. It was 18 foot. Okay, and it's one of those canoes that has a big wide middle because you put camping gear in it and stuff like that. And it was too much for me to handle by itself, okay, because, you know, it was given to me. I didn't even buy the damn thing. A friend of mine gave it to me because he had like a whole shitload of canoes, and we kind of were really good friends, so he gave me one so I could, you know, go boating with him, you know. And because it had a wide bottom, you know, in the middle of the canoe, you know, it was kind of hard to, you know, to tip unless you deliberately rocked it. Now, a 14-foot boat is a lot more narrow, okay? And I got to tell you, when you get into a 14-foot boat like that canoe or whatever, you have to put yourself very low in a squat almost to climb into it with both hands on either side of the thing so you can balance the boat and it doesn't tip, okay? So it's a tricky thing. I had to do that even with the other one, but so that's how you get into those things. Now, if he went out there with that kind of a boat that he got, and he had his dead wife inside with him, okay, I can't see how he could have thrown her over the side in that thing without capsizing inside that boat. They took, some investigators went out there to try to simulate how that happened, okay, how, you know, the way the story, trying to show how hard that would be to do. They had 4 attempts to try and take a, you know, 150-pound weight without the additional anchor weight, okay, just 150 pounds, and toss it over the side. And in all 4 attempts failed, okay, they couldn't do it. They could not do it. And so the idea that, you know, that the story was that he went out there, you know, rowed her out there into the bay or something and dumped her over the side and managed not to capsize doing it is really, you know, I'm not going to say impossible, but, you know, it's highly unlikely, okay, highly unlikely, unless from a sitting position he was able to pick her body up over his head and just, you know, like that. But he doesn't look like he was that strong of a guy that he could just pick up 150 pounds over his head. He ain't Lou Ferrigno. Okay, so how that, you know, was, you know, I mean, the fact that the jury didn't even stop on that to even say, well, Christ, I mean, they're throwing out this theory that that's how he did it, but everybody's saying it can't be done. They tried doing it themselves and they couldn't do it. Okay. And the waters out there in the bay are not calm like glass, okay? They're choppy. So he'd have a problem trying to keep the boat itself from tipping over, let alone trying to toss over his dead wife, okay? So, you know, even, you know, like if you've ever seen a guy try to get back into a canoe once he's over the side, that's hard. He grabs the side of the thing, immediately the canoe's going to flip, okay? That's, you know, you can't do it. There's just no way you can do that unless the canoe has outriggers on it, you know, like what you see in Hawaii, you know, with those, okay? That would be the only way that could be done. But but Peterson's boat didn't have that, okay? It was just a regular boat that he bought. And the fact that he bought, you know, such a small one meant that he wasn't really going to use it that much. He just wanted to use it for, you know, one thing, and that's fishing. Okay, which he didn't do every day. He just once in a while he'd go fishing. Okay, well that's that's all he needed it for. But to go and just to do what he did to try to, his wife. I mean, it don't make any sense for somebody to do that. I mean, you'd probably want to get something bigger, like a motorboat or something like that, and go out there into the water that way, and dump the body, as it were, and into the bay. Okay, so I figured if that's the way he did it, he was probably hoping on the fact that nobody would think that he could do it. But again, they should have had him go out there and try to do it, and see it, but it couldn't be done. Okay, so that's one part of that story that don't add up, that he went and took her out there and dumped her into the water. And then of course they took dogs out to search for scent. The dogs, they go out and they smell, and they had a scent of Lacey Peterson that they gave the dogs, and they went out there and sniffed around the harbor, and the dogs led the investigators to the pier where Scott's boat, I guess, was parked. Okay, and they figured that, and the dogs just kind of stopped right there, and they figured that's where the last traces of her were found. But then they come out and said that one of the dogs was notorious for leading people in the wrong direction all the time, and that the scent was contaminated because the thing they used for the dogs to smell was handled by Scott Peterson. Okay, so it wasn't actually something that was just of Lacey's. Okay, that Scott had it too. So it was they didn't really trust the results of where the dogs was leading. But on the other hand, some people say, well, what's the odds that this dog would have gone right to that pier? We know that Peterson was there, okay, and so was Lacey, so he led them there. So, but like I said, it creates doubt, about whether or not the dogs. Personally, I think the dogs, yeah, you can fool a dog in a scent thing like that in many different ways, but I don't think Scott was really thinking about that whenever he did the crime. Okay, I don't think he was really thinking of that. So unless he had some kind of a scent to just deliberately trail down to the pier, I don't think that he would have wanted anybody to go down that way anyway, because that's where his boat had been tied. So I don't know, but it gives you pause anyway. Well, let's have a little break here. We'll come back and we'll continue.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me!
This is me.
I'm Alex Curtis. I'm a lobsterman in Maine, and this is me.
I'm Ruth McLaughlin, and this is me.
I'm Eric Hopkins. I'm an artist, and this is me.
This is me.
Me.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me.
At the end of the journey, the main thing is you, original.
Then January 6th happens, and next thing you know, I organized the whole thing along with Steve Bannon here. And I want to tell you something, if Steve Bannon and I had organized that, we would have won.
Strawberry? Blueberry? Watermelon? Huh? New triple treat from Bubble Tape. 6 feet of gum, 6 feet of fun. New sour crystals. Better tasting Bubble Tape sours. 6 feet of gum, 6 feet.
Glenn? That's right. I'm on a hippo eating airheads. I'd like a hippo.
Airheads have more fun.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet, Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
Be a part of the entertainment value of a lifetime.
I loved it. It was the best performance I've seen in a lifetime.
I loved the show. I liked it very much. He's a very entertaining man. It's well worth the money.
Now appearing in Charlottetown, coming to Halifax November 6th to the 18th, and St. John November 20th through the 26th.
So, welcome back. We're talking about the Scott Peterson murder here that happened 20 years ago. It happened on Christmas Eve, I guess, was the day that she was murdered. His wife was murdered, and so it was like 20 years, so it's amazing that time going by so damn fast. Christ, it seemed like yesterday when that was all over the news. Anyway, while the investigators were doing their thing, right, they questioned people in the neighborhood of where Scott and his wife lived, okay? They found, a handful of people who claimed they saw Lacey that day walking her dog out in the park, okay? At a time when she was supposed to have been dead, according to what the coroner and everybody that was investigating the murder was saying. It's like, well, it can't be because she was dead then, but they're saying, well, people are saying, well, I saw her outside in the morning out there walking her dog, okay, and because they see her every day. I mean, this neighborhood, obviously everybody's got a dog, so they swear up and down that they saw her that day, and not a single one of them was ever asked to appear in court to give their testimony about that. I think that's pretty crucial information that should have been allowed in there. But the lawyer at the time said, well, it's like playing chess, you have to pick your moves, and stuff. It's like, you know what, that's bullshit. If I was a goddamn defense attorney, those witnesses would have been on that fucking stand that day. Anything that would put reasonable doubt in the minds of the juror is a good thing, okay? So those witnesses should not have been ignored. And all the witnesses that said they saw her said that they were waiting to get called. They expected that they would be called, or to appear in court. And none of them were, and to this day they're really kind of surprised that they never were asked to tell their side of things, what they saw. So, you know, the fact that the dog was found with the leash around its neck shows that somebody had the dog, right, and had the leash, you know, which was muddy or something. So, you know, why was the dog outside with its leash on and roaming around freely, you know? So, you know, and that hasn't really been, that part of the case was never really explained in good enough way for the jury to, you know, kind of, you know, remember that, you know, when they went to deliberations. To me, that was an important piece of data that should have been, you know, crucial in deliberations as to, well, we have reasonable doubt. That looks like maybe somebody else probably might have done this, okay, or, you know, took the dog or whatever, because Peterson was saying he wasn't there. He was someplace else, and he didn't get home until, you know, later that day. And he found the dog in the backyard. So who put the dog in the backyard if he wasn't there, you know? You know, one of the people said that they walked the dog back to this house. They didn't say if they put the dog in the backyard. I guess he had a fence or something in there. But I think that part of the story is pretty important, because that would have given Peterson a door to, you know, being acquitted or even creating reasonable doubt to a hung jury. Okay, that part there. So they really needed to focus more on whether or not these people actually saw her. But the fact is that, you know, police today, you know, they don't like dealing with eyewitnesses about anything, you know, or something. It seems to me like if you're a person and you think you saw something, you take a picture of it, you know, well, we don't have to put that in court. Okay, I just, that's what I feel like today. Everybody is so dependent on people taking photographs of everything. Well, these people didn't know that some crime was supposed to have been committed, so they didn't think of taking a picture. It was something they see every day. They didn't know until later, much later, that, you know, she was missing. Okay, and then they said, oh, well, I saw her, and, you know, okay, so if people knew that she was missing, and then they went out and walked the dog and said they saw her, maybe they might have taken a picture, okay, to show the cops. But you see, they didn't know. These people didn't know. So, you know, it's important that, you know, when someone is missing, that information go out immediately, and so the public knows immediately. That way, if someone does think they saw her or somewhere, you know, then there might be a better chance of actually following up on it. But, you know, again, it's really in the hands of cops and investigators on cherry picking what they want to run with, which to me sounds like maybe we're starting to suspect Scott, you know, from almost the beginning, because of the way he was acting. And usually when cops start to formulate, you know, a suspicion, they run with it, and they stick to it, and they don't really allow for any contradictory data to cast a shadow of doubt on whether or not they were right in the first place to suspect this person. Okay, the cops usually will follow their gut and just go with it no matter what, and ignore all the contradictory evidence to what they believe. So that's a problem with police too. Now, they did try to get Scott to basically cut his own throat. They got Amber Fry to call him and talk to him, Scott, on the phone, and see if she couldn't in some way get him to trip himself up and just reveal that, yeah, I did it, or something close to it, to make, to give more of a solid case to the prosecution that, look, he said this in a phone call, and that, they couldn't get him to come anywhere near that topic. Okay, now either he suspected that he was being questioned by Amber because Amber was being coerced by the police to talk to him, okay, which you know, a lot of murderers are very suspicious people, okay? They're always waiting for the other shoe to drop for the police to show up. So maybe he suspected that Amber was working with the cops at that time when he got that phone call from her. But they couldn't get him to confess or even come close to confessing to a damn thing. He kept saying that he wanted the search to go on and he wanted her found and, you know, yada, yada, yada. And Amber was really pressing the issue. And I think, you know, if I was on the phone talking to her and the way she was talking, I think I would have suspected that she was being coerced by the police, because she was talking specifics with Scott, okay? How often do people tell you what day, you know, like the 9th of August or, you know, or specific? Nobody talks. You know, if they're asking you a question about a certain time when something happened, nobody knows what day of the week it was. No, not Wednesday, but, you know, the date of the week, okay? The only people that talk like that are the police and lawyers, okay? They're the only people who use the actual number of the day of the week, okay, to place the time of when something happened. That's how she was talking to Scott on the phone, okay? Red flag. The other part of it was the fact that she pressed so hard during a certain area to try to get him to explain something he was already explaining to her, but she wasn't accepting it. Meaning that she would never distrust anything that he said in the past. Why is she doing that now? Okay, red flag number 2. Okay, it was getting to the point where she was getting angry. You could hear it in her voice. She was getting really loud and angry at him not saying what he wanted. And I don't think he really was convinced that she was just talking. You know, they were just talking to each other. She was trying to get at, you know, him trying to admit that he was responsible in some way with that. Okay, that's what I think. I think that, you know, Scott, you know, he saw through it. Okay, I think he saw through it, and, you know, I'm surprised that the police didn't suspect that or try to coach her better in trying to talk to him, because she did a lousy job of it. I think when you listen to the phone call, and you can hear that anywhere on YouTube or whatever. I think as a person, you know, hearing a phone call like that, it gives you, you know, a little bit of warning, you know, like when someone's trying to sell you something on the phone. Okay, well, that's how she sounded. She didn't sound in character for him, I think, and that's why he was maybe not going anywhere near the topic of where he was at certain point. He was being very evasive, and he just wouldn't talk to her about it. Okay, so the cops weren't getting anywhere there, but they did bring that piece of evidence into court to play for the jury. Now, why they did that, I don't know. However, I think I know at the time there was a lot of emotion around that case. You know, the general public was all against Peterson for the most part, okay? The only people that could really be objective and say anything about it were, you know, these small reporters from the local area who were kind of pointing out issues in the case that didn't, you know, that kind of contradicted each other, okay? But the larger news organizations and, you know, and the celebrity ones here, like Nancy Grace here, they were all, you know, cheering, you know, let's hang the bastard, you know. So they were basically going off the emotion of this thing. And the reason that this tape, I think, was introduced was because Scott sounded so cold and unemotional, you know, about what he was talking to Amber on the phone. It didn't sound like he gave 2 shits about what happened with his wife, you know. And that was what damned him, I think, as far as public's opinion goes. I think that is what shifted the tide against him, because the jury was and the public was so emotionally charged at the time. Hearing that recording, they were already listening to it in a way that they already hated him in the first place, and that just solidified their opinion of him from that point on. Okay, yeah, and I think, you know, of course, when they found out that he was cheating on his wife, you know, with a woman that they called questionable, or I don't know what they meant by that, but you know, just made the women more angry, you know, to hate this guy. And Gloria Allred, who was involved in this, because that was Amber's attorney at the time. Gloria's good at stoking the fires of whatever emotion is there. You know, she likes to defend women, and if there's a case out there where the women are really pissed off at somebody or whatever in a case, and there's somebody that needs an attorney, chances are you're going to see Gloria there. Okay, she's going to be there. That's why I call her an ambulance chaser, because she's a kind of an attorney who picks the cases she wants to represent. She doesn't take calls from people who need her, okay, unless there's some gain of it for her that does something politically or something, you know, socially or whatever. So she's more or less a showboat for an attorney, okay. And, you know, the jury itself, I mean, my God, so many weird things were happening in that jury. First, the foreman was removed, and I think it was because he wanted more evidence to be convinced that Peterson did it. And he was saying, you know, that he wasn't really, hadn't made a decision, because the evidence, there wasn't anything on the table that they had there that showed that anything was linked to him, you know, in sequence like a chain. Okay, they couldn't find any evidence, any physical evidence. You know, there's no blood and there was no this, there was no that. You know, they couldn't find a goddamn thing to link him up to the crime. All they know is that he was cheating on his wife, okay, and, you know, anything else outside of that is unproven, okay, on both sides. What the defense was saying, what the prosecution was saying, none of that was proven. So you want to talk about reasonable doubt right from the get-go, okay? So the foreman was kicked out, and I think it was because of that. You know, he couldn't go with the others who wanted to hang Peterson there. And the person that took his place was really a real emotional bag of you know, whatever you want to call it. He went in there with the state of mind that Peterson's guilty. Okay, he already made up his mind. He's guilty before he even looked at the facts on the table. And other jurors had pointed that out. He come in there like a, you know, firebrand. Let's get this guy. Let's get him the death penalty. Okay. And while they were in there going through this, one of the jurors had gone outside of the deliberation room and researched something that she had questions about. Instead of getting it from the other jurors, she went outside and read a material or saw material that she wasn't supposed to do, okay, or see. And she admitted that to the court, and she was dismissed, and they had to replace her with a woman who was remember that bitch that was sitting next to Giuliani that was trying to prove that she saw, you know, ballots being switched and stuff like that at the polls? Remember? I can't remember her name. But remember how she acted? Well, that's who this other juror was that replaced this lady here that got caught doing work outside the deliberation room. They replaced her with this girl, and they called her Strawberry Shortcake. Everybody nicknamed her that because her hair was just as red could be. And she had a mouth on her that just wouldn't quit. I mean, every time the cameras were on, she's and she was all against Scott Peterson right from she made no bones about it, okay? Her body was covered in friggin' tattoos and everything. I mean, she was quite a friggin' character. Now, I can just imagine her being in that jury, talking to these people here. And so, with that crap going on behind in the jury room, a decision was reached on a verdict, like, practically overnight, when they were days, before trying to figure out what to do with this case, okay? Now, after she gets in there, okay, all of a sudden, like 9 hours later, they have a verdict, okay. And all the lawyers all thought that was weird. It was the weirdest thing that happened to them. They said they never seen a case like that where, these things happen in a jury, and all of a sudden there's a practically over just a short time later, we have a verdict. Okay, so he gets the death penalty, and after the verdict was read, okay, and everybody cleared the courtroom. All the jurors went right to the front door, right to the media, and stood right there waiting to be talked to by the press. The very first ones that they went and talked to, the new foreman, talked about, if anybody wants to have a book written about this thing, you can come to me. And the lady next to him, the strawberry shortcake, was saying the same thing. Yeah, I'll tell you about the friggin' asshole. And I mean, it's like, it was like, this was like a friggin' circus. This jury, okay? Talk about not an objective bunch of people. These people had already made up their minds that he was guilty, and they dragged the other members of the jury in there to basically follow what they were thinking. Okay, I can just see how trying to deal with those two right there would have been difficult. That they probably bullied the other jurors into saying guilty. Okay, I'm saying that, again, I'm not saying that Peterson didn't do it. He may have done it. But there's doubt to say that he actually did it himself. He might have hired somebody to do it, okay? But he stood to gain from his wife's death. Remember that now. He stood to gain. He wanted Amber Fry because he was screwing her like friggin' two squirrels here. He wanted to be a bachelor. Some people say, well, when his wife got pregnant, he flipped. Like what happened with that Chris, that guy there, the other one, I can't think of his name now, but the other guy recently there that killed his wife and his kids and all that. The idea of becoming a father was just too much for him, and he didn't want nothing to do with it. And so they figured that this is what Scott had, why he killed his wife over. On the other hand, he didn't sound very emotional about it, okay? And he never, he tried right to the end. I mean, you just wouldn't say anything, wouldn't shed a tear about it or nothing. And so, people say that, if he you don't show any emotion about something like that, you're probably the one that did it. And, I'm thinking that, well, that could be, but he may have had reason to just not like her anymore. Maybe their marriage was already falling apart at that time, and maybe out of anger he did it to kill her. It may not have been just because he was cheating on her. It might have been the fact that, something else was going on, maybe financially, because he sold fertilizer or something. Is that what he did that for a living there? Maybe financially they were suffering, and that could be enough to force somebody to murder, just to try to get away from something, maybe to collect on his wife's insurance or life insurance or something, and use that to pay off whatever debt he I don't know, but there's a lot of reasons, okay? And or maybe he's just one of those people that wants to have his cake and eat it too, but with the crazy jury that they had, and the juror that couldn't even answer Larry King when he was being interviewed how that murder was done, I don't see how the verdict even stood, to be honest. Okay, and eventually it was overturned. That the murder, the death sentence was overturned. But why he couldn't get a retrial, which was denied, on so many grounds as to whether or not the investigators did their job right, whether the jury should have been disqualified, should have been, should have had a retrial because the jury just was a friggin' zoo. And yet, people were clapping and applauding when the verdict came down. They got what they wanted, okay? And it didn't matter how they got it. It didn't matter that the investigation was sloppy. It didn't matter that the jury was behaving like bandits in the deliberation room. It didn't matter how many things the cops screwed up during the investigation. All that they wanted was to see Peterson put to death, okay? Because, you know, a crime was committed in their eyes to a woman that they respected, whom they didn't even know. A lot of these people didn't even know Laci Peterson from anything. But yet, with Gloria Allred out there on the side of Laci, painting this very attractive picture of Laci to bring sympathy to her and to bring support to her, I think, you know, she did too good of a job. I think it just swayed the public so much that nobody could be objective at that point. And so the jury pool, you know, would be hard to get the people who didn't already make up their minds about this. I mean, it would have been hard to find somebody, you know, to do this this kind of a case. It's sort of like what happened, you know, with OJ, only OJ, instead of OJ, would be Laci, you know, instead. That, you know, Laci, you know, whoever killed her is going to get fried, you know, and they all think that it was Scott Peterson. And like I said, Scott Peterson probably was involved in Laci's death, either personally or, you know, through somebody else. I'm not convinced that he might have done it physically. He might have hired somebody to do it, and maybe, you know, maybe it was a couple of guys or something like that went out and dumped their body overboard, and they didn't use that little 14-footer that Peterson had. They probably went out with something bigger and dumped her over the side, and Peterson probably figured, well, if they figured that I did it on that boat, there'd be enough reasonable doubt to show that there's no way I could have done it, and I'd be exonerated. You know what I'm saying? It was probably, you know, planned out, which requires, you know, a person it was premeditated. Okay, that I believe, because there's so many parts to that that investigation that looks like, you know, there was definitely something being misled here. Okay, either by the police or deliberately by Scott in how he was telling people, you know, or how things happen as far as his perspective went. Okay, you know, how he showed up and she wasn't there and all this and that, you know, something that fit the circumstances on how he killed her or how he got somebody to kill her. Okay, so there may have been other people involved. I don't know. Okay, I'm reaching at straws here, because at the bottom line of this case, there's still enough reasonable doubt for me to say I can't convict him or exonerate him. Okay, they needed a new trial. That's what they needed in that thing. That trial was a friggin' farce. Okay, the attorneys didn't do their job, the investigators didn't do their job, the jury certainly didn't do their job, and yet they still came up with a verdict and it was accepted. And they won't do a retrial. Okay, even television, they made a movie about this. It painted Peterson as, yeah, he's the one that did it. Okay, the society has already condemned him, all right, and they don't want to hear any more about it. And I think the police are pretty much of the mind that they're not going to want to see this guy get out of prison. But they did overturn the death penalty later on. Probably for grounds that I was talking about before, that, you know, maybe there was reasonable doubt there to, you know, suggest that he wasn't personally involved. I don't know. Okay, but clearly this was a friggin' mess of a case, much like the OJ case was. Okay, a real mess of a case, and you can go ahead and believe how you want whether this guy is innocent or guilty. Okay, you can believe what you want, because I know there's nothing that I could say or anybody could say that's going to change your mind. Because when you talk to anybody about this case, they're going to be firmly ensconced on either side of this thing. You're either for him or against him. Okay, there's no middle ground here. which is where I'm standing. Okay, I'm standing on very thin middle ground here because I haven't yet seen any hard evidence or anything that would say yes, it has to be him. It had to be him. Okay, I'm hearing all the arguments. Okay, about Peterson and what they thought of him and stuff like that. I'm seeing all of that. Okay, and there was a lot of evidence that showed Peterson was probably involved in something of it. Okay, but there's still all that doubt, from all these things that were messed up in the investigation. That doesn't make it so 100% that he did it. Okay, now you may never get to that point in any trial you did. You may never reach 100% certainty in any of these cases, but there's always going to be some bit of evidence that's going to be as certain as dropping a hammer on your foot. Okay, that kind of thing where because there's gravity, it has to fall. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, right here, that means what they got is there's gravity, but we don't know what fell. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm getting from the investigation, is that they did work, but they didn't do it very well. It was very sloppy. Okay, and when you ask a juror, can you explain to me how that murder happened, and they kind of look at you dumbfounded, and they're like, and they can't even answer the question with any detail as to how Peterson could have done this. He could have threw the body over a boat without drowning himself. How the hell did he do all this? Okay, no juror that was there involved in that trial can answer that question. Not a single one of them. Okay, I don't care how certain they sound about it. Okay, but they cannot answer that question. And that right there, I think what Larry King was trying to say was that there's reasonable doubt. Even in the jurors that convicted him, there's reasonable doubt because they can't answer the most basic question about that case. So anyway, that's all I want to talk about for today. So I hope everybody has a great rest of the week and New Year's that's coming up here. So if I don't see you again, Happy New Year, everybody. And I will talk to you later. So, and please keep your ears open for local COVID news. Stay aware that it's still out there. And treat each other nice. No more, try not to be rude to people. Okay? Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.